Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I see some folks are still entering the room, well, I think we should go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for being here with us today for NCRC's Just Economy sessions. Today's webinar is Accelerated Adoption, Older Adults Banking and Financial Management During COVID-19. I'm Karen Colley, I'm a Senior Program Manager here at NCRC, and we're glad to have you with us today. Chloe, can you take us to the next slide, please? Oh, you did, thank you very much. So I think we have a number of NCRC members here with us today on the Zoom, which is great. But for those of you who may not be too familiar with NCRC, we are a national membership-based organization. We're based in Washington, D.C. We have over 600 grassroots member organizations across the country who are a part of our coalition. Our members are diverse. Our members include community reinvestment organizations, community development corporations, local and state government agencies, faith-based institutions, community organizing, civil rights, business associations, local social service providers, a whole host of folks that we call our NCRC members. And our mission at NCRC is to create opportunities for people to build wealth. To make that happen, and you'll see at the bottom of your screen, a list, perhaps not a comprehensive list, but a list of our programs and services that we offer. So in order to sort of make our mission come true, we have numerous programs and services that span the gamut from direct services like housing counseling and training, to testing and challenging discrimination in financial services and housing, to research and representation before Congress and regulatory agencies, and so much more, as you can see. Next slide, Chloe. Thank you. So just some brief housekeeping notes before we begin. So our code of conduct applies to virtual events as well as our in-person events. So feel free to check out that link for more information on that if you're so interested. We are indeed recording the webinar today, and we will send the link out when it's available for viewing to all registrants. At some point later, we'll likely get this webinar recording up on our site for anyone to be able to view for a select period of time. If you have any questions at any point during the webinar, please use the Q&A option that you see on your screen. It should be in the bottom right-hand section of your screen. If you just click on that, you'll be able to submit your question. We will get to questions during the webinar. We'll either respond to them via sort of a text response on the spot, or we may hold off to respond during the live Q&A portion of the presentation. So we'll first do presentations from our two speakers and presenters, and then we'll follow up with questions near the end. And sort of one last very pandemic housekeeping note. I'm parenting today with 2 kids in virtual school as we speak, which is as fun as it sounds. So hopefully you're all set with your classes, but you never know. And if I get an interruption from a kiddo, I trust that you will view that as a slight but understandable programming break during a global pandemic. So next slide, Chloe. Great, thank you. So as many of you know, NCRC's 2020 annual Just Economy conference was canceled this year, of course, due to the coronavirus. And at the conference, we were actually planning to have a conversation around older adults and their interest in and use of mobile banking and financial technology for low to moderate income older adults. Of course, because of COVID-19, we've seen what is probably historic adoption of mobile banking and use of financial technology by both older adults as well as caregivers. And with that sort of rapid adoption, there's also become an opportune moment COVID's providing for scammers and for exploitation, right? So we'll delve a little bit into that the kind of schemes and scams that that folks should be wary of at this point in time. So it's still an important conversation that we're having today, virtually instead of in person. And even though the situation is much different than expected, it's still going to be, I think, a good conversation. So a little background, I lead NCRC's age-friendly banking area of work. We've long considered mobile banking and the use of mobile banking by older adults especially as more and more banks are sort of moving to mobile banking and to financial technology platforms that continue to pop up, there's definitely some concern that increased use in mobile banking and financial services may have detrimental effects on brick and mortar establishments that older adults traditionally prefer. I am a financial caregiver to my own parents, and I appreciate the ability to manage their finances from afar, which is a significant benefit to many caregivers and older adults, but it's also a potential source of scams and financial exploitation and financial abuse. And so there's also a major consideration. It's a consideration, certainly, as older adults adopt mobile options. So let's get started. I'm extremely pleased to be joined today by two experts in this area. Thanks, Chloe. Hannah Godalman is an associate on the program team at the Financial Health Network, where she does consulting and research efforts. She believes that financial health is fundamental to understanding and improving the well-being and resiliency of individuals and communities. She's a native Chicagoan. I think I'm saying that right. Hannah has spent some time living and working in the US, Spain, and Guatemala, where she served in the Peace Corps and youth development. She holds a Master of Science in Sociology with a focus in applied community and economic development from Illinois State University. Welcome, Hannah. And then our second speaker today is Kate Kramer. Kate is a policy analyst with the Office for Older Americans at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Kate's work focuses on age-friendly banking, financial technology, fraud and scams, protecting residents of assisted living and nursing facilities, and elder fraud prevention and response networks. Before joining the CFPB, Kate was the project director of the Elder Rights Center at the Area Agency on Aging of Palm Beach County and the Treasure Coast, where she conducted community outreach and education and worked with older adults who'd experienced financial exploitation, fraud and scams, and other crimes. Previously, she worked as a legal services attorney with a focus on family law, guardianship law, bankruptcy, and consumer law. Kate holds a JD from Boston University of Law and a BA in English from the University of Tulsa. So thank you both for being here today. We'll begin with Hannah. Kate will then present, and then we'll leave the last portion of the hour for questions. So please remember to submit any questions you have throughout the duration of the webinar in the Q&A box at any point. Thanks a lot. Hannah, it's to you.
Thank you so much. Let me get my screen up. All right. Well, thank you, Karen. I'm so pleased to be here today to present some learnings from the Financial Health Network's research on designing fintech for low to moderate income older adults. We, of course, began this research long before COVID, but as we neared the end of writing up our report, stay-at-home orders were just beginning here stateside. And as that happened, we really quickly realized that this topic and our research was going to become all the more urgent and all the more relevant as more and more people were shifting their to digital channels rather than in-person channels out of necessity. So today I'll be talking about some of the barriers and opportunity areas for fintech adoption among older adult users, as well as cover a small selection of the design recommendations that we put forth for designing inclusive fintech products. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Financial Health Network, our mission is to improve financial health for all. To do that, we focus our work in a number of areas. We have a network membership of companies and organizations who are working to improve financial health. We do consulting for those companies and others. We foster innovation through our Financial Solutions Lab, and we conduct various types of research and measurement, and it's one of those research projects that I'll be focusing on today. So the Fintech Over 50 report was released in early May of this year. It reflects in-depth research that we carried out with over 90 low to moderate income adults ages 50 and over who shared with us in interviews and in focus groups their experiences with technology in general and Fintech specifically. Through the insights that we gleaned from these interviews and focus groups, we were really able to lay out some key barriers and opportunities for Fintech adoption for older adults, as well as map out some design recommendations for innovators, for financial service providers who are delivering or want to deliver digital products to include older adults in their customer base. This research was graciously sponsored by the AARP Foundation in collaboration with Chase, who have been supporting our research on Fintech adoption for older adults. If after my talk today, you're interested in reading the full report, you can access that at the bit.ly link on this slide or on our website at finhealthnetwork.org. So jumping in, one of the main reasons we conducted this research in the first place is that we saw a really important opportunity to address a growing range of unique financial health challenges facing the low to moderate income older adults. We identified these challenges in previous research with the AARP Foundation using data from the US Financial Health Pulse, which is our nationally representative survey. Some of the challenges we learned about include things like having insufficient savings going into retirement, facing unmanageable debt loads, having inadequate protection from medical shocks, facing an inability to fully retire due to financial constraints. We're seeing more and more older adults entering the gig economy, for example, as well as family obligations. So we know the opportunity to address these challenges is quite significant. There's 56 million low to moderate income adults 50 and over living in the US. And of those, 83% are either financially coping or financially vulnerable, which roughly means that they're going to be facing some, if not many, of the challenges I mentioned. So really what we're seeing is that the retirement reality of today looks a lot different than the ideal we might have in our minds from previous generations. We also know that there's a real opportunity for Fintech to come in and to offer convenient and secure solutions for many of these challenges that I'm mentioning. We also know, though, that Fintech really isn't being readily accessed by this group. So this leads me to my next slide. What's getting in the way here for Fintech adoption for the LMI 50 plus? We know that lack of access isn't the main barrier here. Previous research on smartphone usage among older adults shows that it's quite widespread. Of adults over 50 who have smartphones are using those smartphones every single day, 94% of them. However, a minority, only 37%, are using those smartphones for financial functions specifically, which prompts the question, what's getting in the way? And this was really a key driver in our research, was to better understand these barriers. Of course, understanding these barriers has become all the more urgent and relevant since the onset of COVID. Older adults, as we know, face higher health risks associated with COVID, and this means that they're less likely to be able to access their existing in-person systems, including their existing in-person financial management systems. So out of necessity, we're seeing engagement with digital channels on the rise, as these headlines I've pulled here note. But what this doesn't mean is that the digital divide has been fully bridged. Just because there is an uptick in adoption doesn't signal necessarily that that adoption will carry through. So it's all the more important that we have a lot of intentionality and support built in here during onboarding, during use, to ensure that there's a positive and lasting relationship with older customers on these digital channels. And this is, of course, especially true since the pandemic has translated into increased financial vulnerability for many, especially those in the low to moderate income brackets. So in order to identify ways to kind of bridge this digital divide, understanding barriers is kind of step one. So through our interviews, through our focus groups, we learned about 4 key opportunity areas that inevitably underpin our specific design recommendations that we put forth in the latter portion of the report. So the first key opportunity area I'll mention here is to empower users. So many of the participants we spoke to described technology as something they felt was being forced upon them, right? By younger generations, by employers. Basically, technology was framed as this inevitability that wasn't going to be a choice much longer. And with that came, a bit of a negative association because their control is being taken away. And especially now during COVID, when a lot of this digital adoption has been done out of necessity, it's all the more important to really get in there and find ways to overcome this negative association. Secondly, we have put users in control. We often tout the benefits of fintech as convenient, as fast, as automated, but interestingly, these aspects aren't necessarily as appealing to people who are often watching every dollar pretty carefully and have their granular systems in place to manage their day-to-day finances. So handing over control of your money to an algorithm or to an app can feel really risky. So how can we maintain a sense of control in a digital environment? Third, we have eliminate stigmas. There are many negative stereotypes about older adults and their use of technology. And what we found talking to participants is that many of them have internalized those stereotypes, regardless of their actual skill level with technology. Many participants walk in the door and say, I'm not tech savvy. I don't know anything about technology. And then a minute later, they would pull out their smartphone and dictate a text message to Siri, or they'd pull out their Square reader and explain how they use it to sell their crafts at the farmer's market. So there was this contradiction between how participants were actually using technology in their day-to-day lives and how they viewed themselves as users of technology. And this is compounded by the fact that older users don't often see themselves represented in the messaging and the marketing of a lot of tech-driven products. So they don't really feel like they're likely users. They don't feel part of the tech world. And then finally, we have foster connections. Time and time again, we heard about the importance of family, of community, of friends, and how those human connections are more valuable than technology or digital connections. So especially now, when maybe those human connections aren't as feasible, it's really important to think about ways that we can foster social connectedness, a sense of human engagement in a purely digital environment. So these 4 opportunity areas underlie the 13 design recommendations that we make in the second half of our report. I'm only going to touch on 4 of these design recommendations today, and I've chosen these 4 based on the user journey that we lay out, but also based on what I feel are most relevant in the current COVID environment. So at the top of the slide here, you'll notice I've laid out a 4-stage user journey, and it's through this journey that we outline our 13 design recommendations. So moving first here to the discovery phase, this is when older users are first learning about a fintech product or a fintech service and are choosing if it's the right one for them. So our recommendation for this discovery phase is to use inclusive messaging. And, returning back to what I was mentioning on the previous slide, older users often don't feel part of the digital world or the tech world. So it's important to signal in a variety of ways that your product includes them. And this can be done through marketing that showcases different ethnicities, different backgrounds, different ages. This can be done by emphasizing the customizability of your product, different use cases. skipped forward there. But one other interesting thing we heard about in speaking to participants is that they're really just interested in products that are specifically aimed to seniors or older adults, because that in a way is alienating them. They want to feel included in the products that everyone else is using. So how can you really build that into the way you're marketing and messaging your product? Moving into the second phase of the user journey, now we're in the onboarding phase. And this is when the older user has chosen the product or service and has decided to give it a try. And we'll learn a lot about this, I'm sure, from Kate's presentation in a few minutes, but we do know that older users are frequently the target of frauds and online scams, and they do know this, and this has been on the rise since COVID. So it's important to build in recognition of this and low risk first steps before asking users to provide sensitive or personal information. For example, asking for a social security number at step 1 may cause some prospective users to abandon the product. So you really want to instill confidence through lower risk first steps. Let them get into the product or the platform and play around a bit before you start asking for sensitive information. And when, of course, you do need to ask for this type of information, it's really important to provide in the moment explanations to make users feel in control of their personal information. You know, explain why you need that social security number, and then explain what you're going to do to protect it. In the third phase of the user journey, this is the navigation phase. So this is when users are building proficiency within the platform, within the app. They're learning their way around. And it's even more important, of course, now when many users are entering unknown digital territory due to COVID, to really help them navigate and learn their way around a new product or service. Many of our participants expressed frustration because, you know, while they were confident in their ability to independently learn and use a new platform or a program, they didn't always feel like they had the tools provided to do that. So one way of empowering users is to provide a range of learning tools, such as dictionaries of icons used in the platform, video tutorials, written tutorials, and put all of these learning materials in a place that's easy to return to. I think we're all guilty of skipping the tutorial the first time around. We really just want to get in the app or the platform and do our thing, and maybe we'll go back to it later. But it's often really difficult to get back to those tutorials. So make tutorials and learning materials on demand and easy to find again. This is really important. Secondly here, software updates, they can feel really disruptive and really frustrating if they change the layout or even appearance of a platform. You know, users have put in all this time and energy to learn their way around, and then all of a sudden when it changes, it can feel really frustrating. So reintroducing these tutorials, reintroducing these learning materials, emphasizing what has changed and how to navigate that is really important in those times. So moving into our final user journey phase, this is the use phase. So users have onboarded, they're navigating through the app, and now they're using it regularly. And this, of course, it's important to continuously instill confident use to prevent users from getting bored or abandoning the product. And especially now during COVID, we want to make sure that we have that engagement and use moving forward into whatever the next phase of life looks like. So one way we've found to empower users and really put them in control of their digital experience is through ample use of confirmations. And these are confirmations that both signal a process has begun as well as a process has been completed. And these can really make user feel confident that the program is working in the way that they want it to. The program's working for them. If you think about an in-person financial transaction, let's say with a teller, for example, you're communicating with a person the whole time about what's going on, about what you're doing, and most times you're going to walk away with some sort of paper receipt in your hand that details what that transaction entailed. So confirmations can introduce that same amount of trust and clarity in a purely digital transaction or purely digital environment. And it's also helpful to think about ways to make your product or service compatible with people's existing analog systems. Something we heard time and time again, users want a way to print confirmation screens, print dashboard views. And this kind of mimics, again, that in-person financial transaction and makes it mesh better with the systems that they already have in place. So that covers my overview for today. I encourage you to please download and share our report. It's our hope that by providing these insights and these recommendations to innovators, to designers, to product teams, that will really be better equipped to address the financial health challenges of the low to moderate income older adults now during COVID, of course, and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks so much. Before Kate takes the reins, I just wanted to remind everyone that you have the option of using the Q&A pod option in the bottom right-hand side of your screen if you would like to submit any questions to our presenters at any moment. We will get to a Q&A live portion after Kate's presentation. So Kate, it's your turn.
Thanks, Karen. So as Karen shared, I'm Kate Kramer. I'm a policy analyst with the Office for Older Americans at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And my work focuses largely on topics such as age-friendly banking, financial technology, fraud and scams targeting older adults, and community networks that work to fight elder financial exploitation. So let me get my PowerPoint up here for you. There we are. Okay, so I'm going to start with a very fun disclaimer for everyone. So this presentation is being made by a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau representative on behalf of the Bureau. It does not constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice of the CFPB. Any opinions or views stated by the presenter are my own and may not represent the Bureau's views. So now that we have that out of the way, let me tell you just a bit about the Bureau and the Office for Older Americans in case you're not too familiar with us. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's mission is to regulate the offering of consumer financial products and services under the federal consumer financial laws and to educate and empower consumers to make better informed financial decisions. And the Office for Older Americans focuses on serving folks who are 62 and older, as well as people who may be family members or caregivers or otherwise interacting with older adults. And we work to help protect older consumers from financial harm and help folks make sound financial decisions as they age. And the Office for Older Americans is part of the Consumer Education Division within the CFPB, so that's our focus. I'm going to talk a bit about some of the coronavirus resources that CFPB has created in the past several months. And so first off, of course, it's very important that we protect and manage our finances during the pandemic. And the CFPB and some other financial regulators have really encouraged financial institutions to work with their customers to meet community needs. You can find a lot of our guidance addressing the coronavirus for financial institutions, which would include banks, credit unions, credit reporting companies, and others, on our website. So I'll talk about some of these resources in detail throughout this presentation, and particularly those resources that are targeted towards older adults and caregivers that might be useful for you. So this is the website we have created. It's a central hub, and we have resources in all sorts of different languages. And this is a hub for all types of resources to help folks protect and manage their finances, particularly during the financial uncertainty that we're all facing right now during the pandemic. So some of the topics may be current information about how people can financially protect themselves using credit and debt management, help with student loan repayment, mortgage relief options, scams, which we'll talk about a bit later, online and mobile banking tips, which is very important, as both Karen and Hannah highlighted. More and more of us are moving towards using mobile banking and other mobile device options. And there's also a guide in this website to economic stimulus relief. And we're constantly adding to this, so it's a great idea to check back for updates. There's lots of federal resources from other agencies in addition to from CFPB on this website. We are also on social media, so if you use any of these platforms, please feel free to follow us to get updates. We're also communicating information through these resources. In addition to the Coronavirus Hub, we created a unified housing website along with some other federal agencies, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Federal Home Finance Agency. And this website is basically a one-stop shop for consumers to find accurate information about relief options that might be available to them during the pandemic. So the website is consumerfinance.gov/housing. You can also find it through our coronavirus site. And there's a great video there about how homeowners can get mortgage forbearance if their finances were impacted due to the pandemic, in addition to tons of other resources for housing. These are some of the content topics that you can find on our website. So submitting a complaint if you're having a problem with a financial product or service, how to protect your credit, tips for financial caregivers, which has become even more challenging than usual due to some of the quarantine measures and social distancing that we're observing, and tips for dealing with debt, and all of the other topics listed here. So let's talk a little bit now about some key scams that are affecting lots and lots of consumers during the coronavirus pandemic. So the first group of scams I want to talk about are healthcare scams. So as Hannah shared, people of all ages were quickly moving to adapt new technologies, and sometimes these digital tools can bring new risks as well, so it's very important to be aware and to be prepared to assess those risks and recognize red flags of common scams. Scammers are always looking for opportunities to take advantage of us, especially during times of emergencies or natural disasters. So just make sure to be cautious of emails or text messages or social media posts that might be selling fake products or information about emerging coronavirus cases that might be false. So some of the health-related scams include offers related to the vaccines, test kits, cures, or treatments, and air filter systems that are supposedly designed to remove COVID-19 from the air in your home. So at this time, there's neither an approved vaccine nor an approved cure for the virus. So if you do receive a phone call, an email, a text message, or a letter with claims to sell you any of these items, it's a scam. And if you have medical needs, it's best to talk to your medical provider rather than following up on something you might see online or receive in a text message. And if you're on Medicare, you may get calls that claim to give you special access to testing or treatments. But unfortunately, those are also scams. Medicare is not offering special access for coronavirus tests or for treatments. So if you get a call like that, please just hang up. One other healthcare-related scam that we've been seeing a lot lately involves fake contact tracing. So a scammer may call or send a text message with a link that they want you to click. Usually they claim that you've been in contact with someone who tested positive for COVID-19 and you need to pay for a test. So their goal there is to get your personal or financial information in an attempt to steal your identity or take your money. Another type of scams we're seeing are the fake charity scams. So typically a thief might pose as a real charity, or they may make up the name of a charity that sounds real in order to try to get money from you. So be very careful about any charities that are calling you asking for donations. Maybe they say they want to collect money to help COVID-19 patients. If you are able to help financially, make sure to visit the website of the organization of your choice directly to make sure that your money is going to the right place. And be wary also if you get a call that follows up on a donation pledge that you don't actually remember making. That could be a scam as well. The third type of scams that we're seeing very frequently are the errand helper scams. So someone may contact you, particularly someone you don't know, who offers to help you pick up groceries or get your prescriptions or other necessary supplies. It's very important to be wary of that because a lot of scammers offer to buy the supplies, but then they never return with either the goods or your money. So it's best, if possible, to get help from a trusted person rather than a stranger. And if you're ordering supplies online, it's also important to know where you're buying from. Online sellers might say they have in-demand products like cleaning wipes or household or medical supplies that are harder to come by nowadays, but in fact, they may not have them. So try to use an established delivery service or order directly from a store near you. And if you need more help, you can look at the Elder Care Locator, which is linked here, eldercare.acl.gov, and they may be able to connect you with services in your area if you do need help getting supplies or help with other issues. And the fourth category is the government imposter scams. So many of us, of course, are paying very close attention to the guidance from federal, state, and local authorities during the health emergency. But unfortunately, scammers are also paying attention, and some will pretend to be affiliated with government agencies just to try to scam you out of some money. So you can see a few of the agencies that are most commonly impersonated listed here on this slide. These are some tips about what to do if you get a call from someone claiming to be a government agency. For example, if you get a message through social media from a supposed government agency, that's going to be a scam. You can report it to the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC, at ftc.gov/complaint. Scammers will also send fake links to websites that look like they're from the government. So instead of clicking on a link that gets sent to you in an email or a message, it's best practice to open up a new window and search for the name of the government agency to find their .gov website. And you can visit coronavirus.gov for the most up-to-date information on the pandemic. And if you haven't received your economic impact payment yet, we also have information about how to claim it on our coronavirus hub, and you have until October 15th at this point. So if you haven't received it, please be sure to look that up and make sure that you follow up. So the bottom line is the best defense is to say no. Don't share your social security numbers, your Medicare ID number, driver's license, bank account, or credit card numbers. And if you get a call from a number you don't recognize, certainly don't answer. They could leave a voicemail if they're legitimate, and that will give you the time to research and make sure that who they say they are is really who they are. If you do answer, I always say it's okay to hang up on a scammer. It's so hard for us, I think, sometimes to fight our natural inclination to be polite, but there's no need to be polite to someone who's trying to steal your information or steal your money. Also listed down here are the peer-to-peer payment apps, like you may have heard Venmo, Cash App, or Zelle. There are tons of them out there. And if you want to use one of these apps to send money to a friend or a family member, just be cautious. Consider perhaps having your friend send you a request for payment first. If the app has that function, it's easier that way because you can be sure that you are then sending your money back to the right person. And if you're going to send money that way, always double check the recipient and the dollar amount before you press send. It's very hard sometimes to get your payments back, so it's best to double check or triple check first. And for an extra layer of security, most mobile apps also let you use a passcode or a fingerprint or a PIN to authenticate yourself before you make a payment. So if you set up that extra layer, that can protect you in case someone else does get access to your mobile device. They won't be able to send money without that fingerprint or that PIN. So I'd like to talk a bit about protecting against fraud specifically while you're using online or mobile banking. So be sure first to create a strong password. And don't use the same password for all accounts. I know a lot of us are guilty of this, and I certainly am. And it's very important to fight against that inclination to have one thing to remember and try to use different passwords for your different accounts. Don't use information such as your address or your birthday in your password. And your bank or credit union may have additional protections that they offer, such as the ability to inactivate your debit card if you suspect fraud. And sometimes it can be challenging to bank mobile only, and you may want to go and speak with someone in person. So if you do need to bank in person, It's a good idea to call first or go online to check to make sure your branch is open, whether they might be offering special hours for older consumers, whether they may be offering services in person only by appointment. Sometimes they're even serving consumers through drive-through windows only. So it's a good idea just to call and double check first so you're prepared before you go. And if you run into an issue and you need some kind of specific help, you can contact your bank or your credit union directly. The customer service associates are typically available by phone or online chat, and sometimes now even video chat. And they can help you set up an online account, answer questions. They can also help you figure out what you can and cannot do with your online account or through their app, which can be very helpful. And noting also that during this pandemic crisis, some of the call centers have very high call volume, so you may need to be a bit prepared for a wait if you're contacting. I want to share just a few more CFPB resources that might be helpful to you. We have many resources for older people and also for people who may manage money or property for a loved one if they're unable to pay bills or make financial decisions on their own. And we tend to call those folks financial caregivers, so you may hear that a little bit later here. So online and mobile banking tips, if you want to hear more about what I was just sharing, there are some tips for folks new to online banking. This helps customers, of course, handle your finances from the comfort of home. There's also some great tips for financial caregivers if you're unable to be near someone whose money that you're helping to manage due to quarantines or social distancing. Some of these tips include using video chat or phone to check in. And we also have some wonderful guides on managing someone else's money, which I'll get to a bit later, which can be very helpful for a financial caregiver who's trying to learn what their rights and responsibilities and what their role is. We have also information on planning your finances. As we know, the coronavirus has changed many people's financial circumstances very quickly. So this is a great way to think about how to put plans in place in case we become unable to manage our finances. And this blog has some tools to help you answer that question and a questionnaire that you can fill out either on your own or together with a partner or a spouse to see how you can both handle the finances. There are also tips there on creating a plan for your virtual assets, which includes things such as your passwords, your online accounts, documents that you may have saved electronically, and many other types of digital assets. This slide shows a few more coronavirus resources for older adults and people who work with them. These resources include how to protect yourself financially, which includes what to do if you're having trouble paying your bills, such as your mortgage, auto payments, or student loans, and several resources related to coronavirus scams if you want to learn more than I've had the chance to share with you today. There's also a few more resources, protections for renters during the coronavirus pandemic. This includes renter protections and changes to the rules for withdrawing from your retirement accounts as well in the second bullet point there. Money Smart for Older Adults is a really wonderful program that we have. You can use either the instructor guide and PowerPoint together to present this program to people in your community, or you can just order the resource guide to read or to use one-on-one with a friend or family member. And this is an awareness program that teaches folks how to identify scams, fraud, and other forms of exploitation, and how to best protect yourselves from those things. There are some great activities in there which really help to teach and learn the material. And there's a glossary of key terms, which can be very helpful, as well as a presentation planning guide and lots of other information. And this, as with most of our resources, you can order in bulk for free from our website. You can order 1 copy, you can order 100 copies, it's up to you. And it's available in both English and Spanish. We also have a series of fraud prevention materials, including the placemats, activity sheets, and handouts that teach people how to avoid common scams. These were originally designed to be used by meal delivery programs, but we found that they've actually been used by a ton of other types of people. So they've been used by community and faith-based organizations, financial institutions, and other groups in a variety of ways. What I love about these is that several of them include activities like crossword puzzles or word searches to make the information more engaging. We also just released some new materials, including bookmarks and table tents that you can also order for free. And again, available in both English and Spanish. I think they're great to use for events, gatherings, group meals, anything. A couple more are the Managing Someone Else's Money Guides, which I mentioned earlier. This provides help for financial caregivers who are handling finances for a family member or friend who is incapacitated or may not be able to manage their own finances. And this also has some tips on protecting money from fraud and scams. There are 6 state-specific guides. So Georgia, Florida, Illinois, Arizona, Oregon, and Virginia are all represented in those guides. But since we haven't gotten to every state quite yet, we also have a tips and templates guide for adapting those guides to your state. We also have several resources related to reverse mortgages, which are wonderful resources. They're not on this slide, but I'd encourage you to check out the link at the bottom, consumerfinance.gov/older-americans, to learn more about those. And they really help simplify the often misunderstood concepts that are related to reverse mortgages. Helps you kind of think through the pros and cons as it might apply to your unique situation. You can also use our reverse mortgage discussion guide to talk with someone else about the pros and cons of a reverse mortgage. The last on this slide is the Protecting Residents from Financial Exploitation Guide. So this was designed for assisted living and nursing facility staff, but you can also use this guide yourself if you have a loved one who might be living in an assisted living or nursing facility, so that you can learn more about how to recognize and respond to elder financial exploitation if it begins to affect them. So if you need more help, or if you have a complaint about a financial product or service, you may want to reach out to a professional to help you with your specific situation. The first on the list here are the HUD-approved housing counselors. So these individuals can discuss options with you if you're having trouble paying your mortgage loan or your reverse mortgage. This may also include forbearance or a modified payment program. They can help you look through your options and figure out what might be best for you. There are also reputable credit counseling organizations. Generally, they may be nonprofits, and they can advise you on your money and debts and help you with your budget. Some may also even help you negotiate with creditors. And if you need a lawyer, there may be resources to help you through your local bar association, legal aid society, or if you're a service member, your local legal assistance office may be able to help. And you can visit our coronavirus hub to get information about how to find these resources in your community. Now, if you have a problem with a financial product or service, CFPB can take those complaints. So it's best to try reaching out to the company first. And if you're not getting an answer from them or you're not getting help from them, we can help you connect with them to understand the issues and get a direct response about the problem. So when you submit a complaint, we work to get you in contact with the company and get your response. You can submit your complaint online at the link here. That is pretty much it for me. I just want to note that you can join the mailing list for the Office for Older Americans to receive occasional alerts and updates about blog posts, network news, funding opportunities, or anything else. Just want to thank you for your time and attention today. I hope everyone stays well, and I will hand it back to Karen.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. And Hannah as well. That was an excellent presentation from both of you. We have about 11 minutes left for questions. So this is an opportunity to go ahead and submit your questions via the Q&A pod option at the bottom right-hand of your screen. But I'll go ahead and ask a few questions myself. So one of the questions that I think that I get sometimes from some of the NCRC members that I chat with is, obviously the coronavirus has spawned sort of this rapid adoption of mobile banking because, things were closed, folks couldn't be in person together interacting. This will eventually be over, right? We'll eventually be able to be in groups again and back into establishments in large numbers. And so when we sort of do go back to, normal or whatever that may be, will mobile banking, will financial technology be sort of reduced? Do you think that this trend will continue? What are our thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can.
So I'm sure,
Oh,
go ahead. I was going to say, I'm sure Hannah may have more to say than I might on this, but I just wanted to note that I've seen several articles lately talking about how consumers have expressed that they do not want to change their habits back to in-person banking quite as much as they may have used in the past. So I thought that was very interesting. A lot of people are planning to stick with mobile banking to at least some extent. But Hannah, I'm sure you have much more to share.
no, yeah, I agree with that. I think there is ample evidence of, well, for one, just of it being kind of a sticky behavior, right? If you're gonna kind of go through the ropes and learn your way around a digital product or tool, more likely than not, you're going to stick with that because you are going to see the benefits and the convenience. But I guess I'm also of the mind that I really do think people have to be happy enough with the tool and with the support that they feel like they're getting within it, for them not to feel like they want to kind of back out of that if and when there's the option to kind of go back to the in-person channels or the analog systems. But I think, yeah, there's mounting evidence that it's going to be a pretty sticky behavior. So it's best that we really get on board with it now and provide the tools and the support.
Hannah, did your study look at variables such as sort of geography and sort of focus maybe on the interests or the gaps and needs in sort of rural areas as opposed to sort of more urban, suburban areas? And then also, did you look at sort of gender and consider any effect that may have had on use?
Yeah, so we did do interviews and focus groups with both urban and rural participants, to kind of get both of that side of things. I think one of the kind of differences of note from that divide is that is kind of in that discovery phase. So we found in participants living in rural areas, they're maybe a little bit more likely to be kind of searching for new tools and products on digital channels such as social forums, on social media, on review websites, on YouTube videos, versus people in urban areas might be learning about those in in-person community centers or churches or things like that, just because of the constraints of living in a rural geographical area. I can't really speak too much to differences across gender. But, I think one of our conclusions or call to actions is, we put forth these design recommendations, but for every, product team, the next step really would be to really figure out who your target customer base is and do further user testing to really figure out what their needs are and which design recommendations to really dig into.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have it's more of a comment in our Q&A pod from Alexis Pullen, who is an adult protective services investigator. And Alexis seems a bit surprised to hear the stats about smartphone use, because in the areas where they serve, a lot of folks do not seem to have smartphones, computers, or internet access. And I've heard that as well from some of our NCRT members who are in certain sort of areas of the country, and that may be sort of different from perhaps what you found in your study. Can you speak to that a bit? The sort of real qualitative experience that some folks may be having in APS, and sort of the use or non-use that they are seeing around LMI older adults, and sort of what you found in your study.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one thing to note here is that, the low to moderate income 50 and over, it's a huge population, and there's going to be a lot of diversity within the population, with age, with geography, with comfort in technology, with access to technology. So I think there's kind of two levels of digital divide. There certainly are digital divides that hinge on access. Not everybody's going to have access to Wi-Fi or a data plan that will allow them to comfortably use, a mobile banking app, for example. But others may have those tools at their disposal, but don't yet have the resources, the learning resources that they need to use them confidently and independently. So I think it's really going to be dependent on the subpopulation within this pretty large group who you're dealing with what the main barriers are.
Yes, right. Thank you. So, Kate, I have a question for you. With the sort of the increase in banking and the increase in financial technology use, do you have any sort of specific recommendations that you would provide to financial caregivers, or in terms of protecting themselves as the caregiver, while sort of delving a little bit more heavily in sort of this mobile world?
Sure. So certainly in terms of connecting with the care recipient or the loved one that you might be caregiving for, I think phone calls and video chats can really help us to connect, even if health officials are encouraging limiting contact. And that way you can pick up on some of the nonverbal cues so that you can check in and ask questions. Perhaps if your loved one expresses concerns about money or mentions some kind of unusual activity. And of course, it's important to be aware of the scams. And you can learn actually quite a bit about what you can and cannot do as a financial caregiver by reading the Managing Someone Else's Money Guides, which I mentioned during the presentation and should be in the PowerPoint. But it is definitely challenging. I mean, it's tricky to find a way to manage finances from afar, particularly if your loved one may not have online accounts or other types of mobile services that they're using. So I think just keeping an open line of communication, and perhaps if they are living with someone else or perhaps living in some type of assisted living or nursing facility, even engaging the staff to help them get online, and then they can perhaps communicate a little bit better with you about their finances.
Yeah, definitely. If you sort of had to say, maybe list the top 3 things that people could do to reduce their probability of losing money, what do you think that would be?
So first, I always tell people just never be rushed into a deal, because scammers love to use that feeling of urgency to trick you into acting without thinking. So it's very smart to take your time, sleep on it if you're questioning something that you're hearing. It's also good, I think, to shop around and get a second opinion. So in a lot of cases, it could be helpful to consult with a trusted person like a spouse or a family member or a friend where you trust their opinion. And then third, if you have access to internet or are able to get online, you can also just Google something along with the word scam or fraud to see what results you get. So if you get an email or a text message or a written letter, sometimes you can just try copying some of the text into Google to see if it comes up with any results. And that can help you prevent yourself from getting caught into a trap of losing money. The scammers are so sophisticated, they really know how to trick us. So it's best to just always be a little bit on guard and do your research.
Right, definitely. Well, thank you both so much for answering those questions. I appreciate it. Chloe, why don't we go to the exit slides, as we are nearing our end of our time together. Excellent. Thanks, Chloe. Thank you all so much, Hannah and Kate, for joining us today. Big thanks to Chloe, who sometimes goes unthanked in these webinars. We really appreciate your work, and you're helping us to make these webinars happen. We will get out a follow-up email probably within the next 10 days or so with the link to this recording, as well as any presentations if we're able to get permission, and we'll definitely follow up with that. Next slide, Chloe. So a big sort of shout out to our NCRC members. If you are not an NCRC member and you would like to become one, please check out ncrc.org/membership, where you can learn more about NCRC and what we do, and some of the advantages and benefits of being an NCRC member. Next slide. Excellent. And a promo for our next upcoming event as part of the Just Economy sessions, September 29th at 2 p.m., Mayors for Guaranteed Income. This is going to be a really exciting session featuring 3 amazing mayors from 3 really interesting cities in the U.S., Jackson, Mississippi, Madison, Wisconsin, Stockton, California. This one is not to be missed for sure. So with that, I want to say thank you again to everyone. We really appreciate our presenters, we appreciate our attendees, and we hope to see you on September 29th. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.